To improve is to change. To perfect is to change often. Now, those of you that know me as the corny history geek that I am, shouldn't be surprised that I started my speech today with a Winston Churchill quote. But I chose these words because they really speak to the heart of who I am as a candidate and the vision I have for the MBAA. Now, my close friends will tell you, I didn't meet immediate success in my internship search this year. I failed hard and I failed often. But each failure throughout my journey gave me the opportunity to really step back, reflect, reevaluate what was working, what wasn't. Each time give me the opportunity to get better, to reposition myself, to ultimately become a better interviewer, to transform into a better interviewer. And that's why I'm here, why I want to be your next president. Transformation. Now, we've had a great and successful year. I can speak personally on having the honor to have served as the VP of Outreach this year, and the amazing team that I've been able to work with. Great successes that our committee has had. First, talking with Outreach. Jackie's done a great job in terms of connecting with a lot of new programs. For the first year, having a seat on the Graduate Student Council. Jacob had a great job in terms of having our Woodser be one of the biggest we've ever had. And as business students that we like, very cost effective. And then finally, we can't say that service has not been great this year. We've been able to maintain great relationships with one of our key partners, Keep Alachua County Beautiful, thanks to the great work of Zach. And it's not to say we haven't had a perfect year. You know, we've had struggles along the way. New things bring that. It was, Woodser was new. We had some difficulties. The election process that we changed. But the point is that these new things, though difficult, had a net gain, something positive that came out of them for the program. And that's what I want to do next year. I want to really take that change, that transformation the program has given me thus far, and really give it back to the MBAA. The first thing I will do as your next president, if elected, will be not only to do the committee to revise our constitution, but really start a new foundation to build upon by focusing on really not leaving any sacred cows in terms of what positions we have on our board, committees, reevaluating what is going to make us most efficient and effective next year. Making sure that there's really clarity of purpose for each position so that we really get the most out of this program. The next thing is working on programming. So I talked to Megan, and though she said it's difficult, she did say it was feasible for us to start some key programming earlier on. So the effect that we're going to have in terms of getting our board at least partially up and running before the year is over, at least getting a game plan going so that when the year starts, we start on a good foot. Starting key committees in terms of the great success that Susanna had this year with the case competition committee. Really preparing students even before NABIMBA on how to be successful in case competition, in case interviews. And then finally, transparency and engagement. I want to make sure that we do programming that brings people to the events, that provides value in terms of connections built, that people actually get to know one another, work with each other, to develop professionally, to learn something new. And I want to do transparency so that we make sure that no matter what, everyone knows what's going on with the MBAA, that there's no doubt on that. I want to make sure, for example, that the position of the cohort rep is not only a position that gives information from the cohort to the MBAA, but also that serves as a leader of engagement to bring forth their cohort to interact with one another. Ultimately, I leave you all with this. I'm someone who puts passion into what I do. And if you've had a chance to talk to me recently and heard me talk your head off about Kellogg's, I promise you I will do the same about the MBAA next year. So thank you so much for your time and consideration, and I'll be open to any questions now and even after this day. Thank you so much.
So the first question that we got from the student body is, please highlight how your experience this past year has prepared you to serve as president.
Well, I would say that a lot of different experiences this year, both personally, just transforming and growing, as I mentioned, with just becoming a new MBA student, but also in my experience within the MBAA board. Having the honor to have really served as the VP of Outreach really gave me that experience of being on the board, seeing what worked this year in terms of leading a team, what could be improved for next year, not only for the board in general, but for myself as a leader, really giving me that test drive and giving me the lessons that I can really bring forward next year. In addition to that, it's really having worked with the board members, really seeing what other committees did that was really successful, what other committees did that maybe they struggled with, that my committee may have struggled with, that we can really improve on next year. It really hits the heart of my biggest promise to you all, which is the reevaluation of what can be done better structurally so we can have a continuation of not only making next year great, but all the years after that.
Question 2. From the new ideas you intend to bring to the program, how feasible are they, and have you consulted the admissions office on any of them? Admissions, I assume, means administration.
Administration. So as I did mention briefly in my speech, I did have the opportunity to speak to Megan about my platform. And she mentioned to me that it's not to say that it's going to be easy, but it is feasible in terms of what I really want to accomplish for next year. The aspect of really taking a hard look at what our organization is doing in terms of structure. We already discussed the Constitution Revision Committee and just taking the next step of not only just revision what our statutes look like, but what our actually positions look like and do is not that hard of a step to take. And after discussing with Megan, it is very feasible to do. The next major thing in terms of the programming earlier, again, speaking with Megan about this, it's really just an aspect of effort, but once we get up and growing in terms of our preliminary board before the first years come in, we can at least start getting a game plan of what sort of events, what sort of things we want to focus on, so that when the MBAA gets fully up and running, we don't have that awkward restart period, but rather it's a much more smooth transition into the next year, so we can really start getting programming much earlier and really start getting that engagement up and running.
So you kind of answered this question, but Mod 1 revolves around November, but often programming is forgotten until later mods, so how would you change that?
So yeah, as I mentioned briefly in my speech, one of the main takeaways that I had this year that I thought was a really great success is the case team, kind of unofficial club that we created led by Susanna, which allowed students that wanted to do strategy-based consulting or interviews that had a case component the opportunity to practice, to get best practices and lesson learned, practice with their peers. I feel that can be expanded to other fields. I'm specifically thinking of marketing and finance that have their own case components that we can start practicing much more often before we get to November and Prospanica. I think that we had a great job this year in terms of having those preliminary meetings with all those concentrations. For me, it's much more about just taking that next step and just having a little bit more of a follow-up so that the practice of what we learn continues and makes us that much more successful when we go to career fairs.
Great. Thank you very much.